Welcome to the M2C podcast, the official podcast of the Master M2C. Today, we'll cross borders to talk about global collaborations when universities connect, global classrooms. In this episode, we will explore how university collaborations are born, how they work, and why they bring to both the students and professors. With us today, we have two guests who have both experienced this type of international collaboration, Dr. Buckwalter and Dr. Robinson. Hello and welcome.
Hello, Luisa.
We'll talk about their motivations, their challenges, and the benefit of this kind of projects. They also will talk about the cultural differences they encounter, and we wrap up with some advice for students and also for teachers who would like to make this kind of projects or experiences. Now, to break up a little bit, I have a question for both of you. What is one cultural habit from your country that you would like that everyone in the world would adopt? Dr. Robinson?
Well, first of all, hello everyone, and thank you for having me with you today. This was an easy question in the end because on Thursday we celebrated Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving is a wonderful, wonderful holiday where people are thankful for what they have, both their material blessings, such as food and shelter, and their immaterial blessings, such as their family, their friends, their health. And it's also a holiday where, if possible, people try to go home to see their family. I was Zooming with a classroom in Russia, and they said that for them, New Year's is that holiday. Everyone tries to get home. And I know in China, that's the biggest travel holiday of the year, New Year's, because they all try to get home. So Thanksgiving is our holiday where people try to get home. But what I like best is that people are thankful, are grateful for what they have. And it doesn't matter if you are religious or not, everyone can be thankful for what they have.
That's cool. Who doesn't love Thanksgiving anyway? What about you, Dr. Buckwalter?
Well, I have to say that Thanksgiving is one of my favorite holidays. Actually, it is my favorite holiday. And I completely agree with what Sherry said. The opportunity to celebrate Thanksgiving in France, obviously, would be nice, especially if it were a public holiday where we had, work off and school off and so forth. But I think, just generally the opportunity regularly to get together with friends and family on a regular basis or just to celebrate. And I think that's something from the United States that I would like to import to France is the opportunity to celebrate what little holidays, not necessarily like public holidays that exist already, but like St. Patrick's Day or St. Valentine's Day or, of course, Christmas, Thanksgiving. Just these periods that break up the routine a little bit, that gives us the opportunity to celebrate because that's all part of life, right? It's getting together with friends and family and not necessarily having a big party or a bash, but the opportunity to get together and to break bread or convene and take a break from the humdrum of everyday life.
Of course, I completely agree. And I love the way that with internationalization nowadays, we can adopt some kind of celebrations from everywhere. But if I would have to answer this question for my country, I would say Christmas because we have like a whole steps and celebrations during the whole month. So yeah, it would be so nice. And also because it's it has to be a lot of with celebration and to meet your family and your closest circle. Now I would like to move on and talk about the motivations and the choice of this collaboration. Can you introduce yourselves and your academic background? Starting with you, Dr. Robinson.
So my name is Sherry Robinson. I'm an associate professor of business at Penn State, or more officially, the Pennsylvania State University, Hazleton campus. The University Park campus has over 40,000 students. My campus has a little over 500 students, so we are considerably smaller. And in many ways, that can make things easier for collaboration because I'm the only one that teaches my particular classes. So I don't have to confer with someone else. How shall we run this class or that class? So if I want to do a virtual exchange with students at University of Paris Nanterre, I don't have to ask anyone else if that's okay. So I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think that's an advantage also.
Mhm.
What about
Yes, I agree. And also at University Park, it is not uncommon for there to be 1,500 students in a class. And that really isn't practical to try to put groups together. So I think the size of UPN and PSU Hazleton is a good fit.
Okay. What about you, Dr. Buckwalter?
So I'm Elvis Buckwalter, so maître de conférence, or I guess it would be translated in English as associate professor of English and business at the University of Paris Nanterre. I've been here for about 15 years, and this is the first virtual exchange that I've been involved in with Dr. Robinson. So yes, Sherry and I, we've been doing this virtual exchange for, how long has it been, Sherry? Almost 6 years now.
So we met online on April 7th, 2021.
Okay.
When the Penn State and Paris Nanterre had an online session to introduce people. And I remember the date because then it was April 7th, 2023, when I landed in Charles de Gaulle.
Oh, that's a really good sequence.
We started out with a virtual exchange. It was during the period when there was still cases of COVID and we were still under lockdown here anyway. And there was a policy of our universities to facilitate international exchanges between, Nanterre students and also students from Penn State. And so the idea is to allow for international exchanges between our students virtually, so on Zoom. So with Sherry and I, we've been collaborating for some years now on ways that our classrooms can work together. And I think, Luisa, you're pretty familiar with how that works because you today are working with groups of students from Penn State University on various projects. So you have firsthand experience,
Yeah, exactly.
in what types of collaborations that we do, because a lot of our students, even in languages, they don't have the opportunity to take a plane and spend a significant amount of time in a foreign country. And at least with the virtual exchange that Sherry and I we've been developing, it allows students to travel even virtually and get a taste of what it's like in other countries and cultures.
Yeah. For example, for me,
And to make friends.
yeah,
Hopefully.
of course that. And for me,
To me, that's very important.
yes, Yes, for me too. And I found this experience really accurate. And that's why I would like to know, like, what first motivated you to collaborate or to create this specifically collaboration, and why? Why Université Paris Nanterre?
Well, I think one of the reasons is that we have a convention. The Université Paris Nanterre and Penn State University have a convention that allows for students to go to each other's universities in an easier fashion, and also for scientific exchanges. So if Sherry wants to come here to Paris Nanterre, which she's already done, or if I want to go to Penn State University, which I have already done, administratively it makes things a little easier. So, but I don't know what you think, Sherry, but I think that when we met, so on April 7th, 2021, it was, I don't want to say destiny, but we really hit it off. And I
That's
think
exactly what I would say. We hit it off. And I think that is one of the most important factors in a successful and then long-term exchange, because we have done projects in many classes over probably about 8 semesters now. And I think that the relationship between faculty is really important, because I know some people with whom I am not in such a good relationship, and I don't want to work with them anymore.
you're not naming any names, are you?
Naming any names.
And I
But
think we don't want to know. Okay. Now
well,
that
there's more, we need to be honest, there's more than one. And one was actually an American at another school, and that's how I hooked up. But she retired, and I'm good with that. So it really is all about the people. The faculty need to get along, and then we really hope that the students will make friends. So this does not always happen. And I know right now there's one group where it has been very, very difficult, because the Penn Staters are not really good partners. I'll put it that way. And the people really are the core of the whole project. I think the people are more important than the project itself.
But I think at the same time, this is like the objective of this kind of collaborations, to know each other's differences and to go on. Now that we understand what we sparked the project and where the motivation came from, let's take a closer look at what this collaboration actually looks like in practice. For listeners, because I know the project, so could you describe the collaboration actually, like what consists of? Like describe a little bit the collaboration, and yes.
Sure. So for this semester anyway, because Sherry and we have plans for the second semester as well. As you're well aware of, Luisa, we're doing a class, part of a class together, which for us is Discours en situation professionnelle. And for Sherry, the name of your class, I think, Sherry, correct me if I'm wrong, is Global Business. Is that right? No.
International business.
International business. And so the idea was to get our classes together to make friends. I think Sherry said it very well, and to engage in international exchanges of ideas and cultures through the work that we do. So even if the technology doesn't always cooperate in our classrooms with the Wi-Fi connection and all of that, it does give you the opportunity to work in groups. So for our listeners who might not be aware, The Nanterre students are put into groups with students from Penn State, and they work in mixed groups on projects. So we give students on a weekly or biweekly basis a prompt. So topics of discussion that are recorded on Zoom by the students that give an idea about how the interactions between the Penn State and the Nanterre students go. So the topics that are discussed oftentimes revolve around cultural differences between the United States and France, but oftentimes another country, because many of our students at Nanterre, anyway, are international students. You yourself, Luisa, you're an international student as well, which adds a new dimension, a new dynamic to the way that we work. And that's really at the heart of what we do in our department, which is international and intercultural management, and what Sherry does too on her end with international business is cultural exchange of ideas, ways of doing things, sometimes new ways of doing things. In a nutshell, there's a project that all of our students are working on that present a third country, not the United States and not France, about the country, its cultural specificities, the language that's spoken, maybe the currency. So we have 10 different countries which students are working on. I won't name them all, but Canada, there's Spain, Colombia, of course, the Côte d'Ivoire, there's
India, I think.
India, Austria, Canada,
Japan,
Georgia.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah, there's quite a few. So our students are working together on country presentations and country projects to collaborate with each other, of course, but also to learn more about third country.
Okay.
And this was meant as a practical project. The scenario for the project is that students are presenting a webinar that could be used for training when someone is going to be an expatriate in that other country. And let's pick Austria, for example. If you're going to go live and work in Austria for a while, you could watch the webinar. You could have your family watch the webinar, and you could learn about some of the things you would need to know if you live in that country. And how we picked the 10 regions is that those are 10 different clusters in the cultural intelligence model developed by David Livermore. So we wanted to make sure everybody had something different. We didn't have Austria, Germany, and Switzerland, but that we had it spread all around the world in different cultures.
Yes. And I think that's why I love the most about this course is its practical basis, because it's not only like homework. You can use it in your daily life or in your professional life in the next years. And I would like to know also, like, what have been the most meaningful academic or intercultural impact that you experienced so far with this project?
For me, as kind of coming back to what I said about being friends, for me, the most important part is when my students say to me, wow, I really liked this other person. They're just like us, or I would be friends with them if they were here. So it makes the world a little smaller, because many of my students have never been outside of Pennsylvania unless they're from the Dominican Republic, and I have a lot of students from there, and maybe they've only been to the Dominican Republic and the US. Many of them have not been out of the Northeast. They haven't even been to Florida, which is a common trip for us. but it lets them make friends to see, wow, yeah, the people in Europe, the people in somewhere else, they're really nice. They're people too.
Right. Yeah. No, I would totally agree with what you just said, Sherry, because a lot of times we have this impression that a classroom is a place where we teach a lot about theory, and students take notes and then regurgitate those notes during a test. And in fact, I think this is just my teaching philosophy. We learn best by doing, and when we interact with other people, have conversations with them, work with them side by side, even if it is at a distance on Zoom, we're still doing something. Whether it's both of us, Sherry, or the students when they're working together, they're also doing something in a very practical way. Working on a webinar that's something that they can totally put on their CV and put this in a portfolio and use it as professional experience, because as the world becomes smaller and smaller, things like podcasts or things like virtual exchanges and collaborations are becoming an everyday occurrence. And in any organization, a worldwide organization or multinational organization, cross-cultural teams are going to become more commonplace, and working with teams internationally is a skill. I think it's not something that we're innately born with. It's something that takes a little practice, and if we can do it at the university in a semi-professional context with the hopes that students become professional later on, I can at least be assured that I've contributed a little bit to the future of the students.
Yes.
And I see my own teaching style evolving. If we go back 30 years ago, I was really all about explaining material, trying to help students memorize it so they could spit it back out on a test. But
Yeah.
then over time, I would say I realized, but students outright told me that they would just forget everything they learned as soon as they walked out the door because they had only memorized it for the test. And I talked to myself and I said, self, I think it would be more important to focus on things that will be with students for their lifetime, or at least for a year or two. And in our economy, in our society, it's really important now to show that what you can do, not just what you've memorized. And when you leave college, when you graduate, it is not the end of learning. You can still learn. You can watch videos, you can read books, you can do many things to learn more material. You need to learn more material. It's not a matter of, I finished college, I will never learn anything again. It really needs to be lifelong learning. But experiences can actually make that much richer as a learning process, deeper learning, getting more into long-term memory. And also, just as you said, to be able to put it on a resume to show I have done this. Not just what do I know, but I have experience doing this. So just in my class, what you've not seen, what we've done on Tuesdays when we weren't Zooming with you on Thursdays, I'm telling my students, you can read the PowerPoint on your own from Canvas. In class, we're going to do these activities to really make sure we can do it to have a different learning experience. And I know when we were talking about exchange rates, I went over it a bit to begin with, and everybody thinks, yeah, I understand. But when we did an activity where we were actually doing exchange rates, we were doing an investment activity, I heard them say, I thought I knew what I was doing, but then when I actually have to do it, I didn't really understand after all. And I was happy to hear that, to know that, yes, now we are actually making progress. This activity is truly helpful.
Yeah.
So I'll pull that all the way back around to say in virtual exchange, you can say, I have worked in an international context.
Yes, and the best way to understand these kind of complex terms or subjects like culture is by doing and by exchanging with people from other places. We talk about the structure of this project, its goals. Now let's step into, I think we already did it a little bit, but let's step into the human part. How people from different systems and cultures actually work together. Because of course I think we have experienced a lot of differences and shocks, like cultural shocks. So what do you see as the biggest difference between American and French systems, like working universities or etc.?
Well, I think that's a really good question. I might just jump in, Sherry, about
Yeah, please do.
about this question. The rhythm, I think, in France is a little. I don't want to say chaotic. That might not be the right word, but dense in the respect that students have more classes and fewer hours, whereas in the United States, students have more hours and fewer classes. So, for example, here, both undergraduate and graduate studies at the university, students have one class one time per week, which makes for a lot of classes one time per week, whereas in the United States, the rhythm is a little different. So most students are going to have a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or a Tuesday, Thursday schedule. So they'll meet for the same class either 2 times or 3 times per week, which makes for perhaps more in-depth discussions about the subject matter. On the other hand, there are fewer subjects, so more depth, fewer subjects, whereas here in France there are more subjects that are treated perhaps maybe more superficially. I think the two university systems, as far as scheduling is concerned, are pretty similar as far as the semester systems. There's a first semester and a second semester. Sometimes our university calendars jive, and other times they they don't. For holidays, so spring break, fall break, things of that nature. But in the university system, I don't think there are any radical differences, but there definitely is a dynamic, maybe, especially at the undergraduate level, that might be a little different, or just in classes in general. In the United States, I have a tendency to feel that students are perhaps more autonomous or individualist in their way of going about their studies. It's something that's very personal. So if somebody is interested in a subject area, they're going to pursue it alone, whereas in France, a student can be also just as interested in a subject area, but oftentimes they'll work more as a group, collectively speaking. I feel that there's more of this collectivist culture in France than in the United States, but I don't know. That would be my first reaction. I don't know what Sherry.
Okay, so for you, it's like the conception of time and teamwork.
As far as scheduling is concerned, that's one difference, and teamwork. Yeah, I think there's it's ingrained in French culture that I don't want to say it's like the professor against the group of students, but there is a hierarchical difference that's either implied or felt between students and their teachers in France. I think that's one of the topics that Livermore discussed that Sherry mentioned previously, and many intercultural studies researchers, Hofstede, Hall, talked about this hierarchical distance that exists between teachers and students, and in France, it has a tendency to be a lot greater than it is in the United States. Just for example, in the classroom, when a student addresses me, usually it's Monsieur or Monsieur Buckwalter. Nobody would call me by my first name, whereas Sherry in her classroom, a lot of her students call her Dr. Sherry. And I remember when I was at the university in the United States, some of my professors I would naturally call by their first name. And in retrospect, I think, oh, well, it's almost like we're on a level, playing field, the students and the teachers, which is more of I guess a collaborative mindset. Yeah, the question of hierarchical difference, I think, is an interesting one in how it shows up both in France and the United States.
Okay, thank you. And for you, Dr. Robinson, have you experienced cultural surprises or shocks while you're teaching or collaborating with this class, for example, this year?
I think you have to try to distinguish between cultural differences and personality differences. I'm just going to say, there are some people who are lazy. They will try to do as little work as possible. And a very important part of the entire Penn State system, I would say the entire American system of college, is sports and athletics. And there are quite a few people who come to college not because they're interested in learning, but because they want to play sports. And for me, this is a very expensive way of playing sports because college is not free. It costs around $20,000 a year just to attend Penn State. And that is if you are living at home, so you don't have the extra expenses. So some students are not interested in school. They're only there because they want to play. And they have to have a 2.0 or a C average in order to play. And some of you listening to this may know, well, the people in my group, were not really hardworking, or they did not seem to be all that interested. Or maybe they blew off meetings or wanted to rearrange meetings. So coming back, I can't say, oh, well, because this person is lazy, everyone in that culture is lazy. No, you have to try to balance, although you do see some trends over time. As you said, the formality, I think the French are far more formal. And I would put the US in the middle because I lived in Norway and taught there for quite a few years, and they are much lower power distance than we are. Everyone goes by the first name, and I had students act rather disrespectfully to me because they saw me as an equal or possibly a little below them. So the US is kind of between that low power distance and the higher power distance. I came up with the name Dr. Sherry because when I was at the point where I earned my PhD and became a doctor, I was teaching at a school that focused on adults. So I think almost everyone in my class was older than me. So the Dr. Sherry was like a nice little middle ground between, you should really call me doctor, and I'm younger than you can call me Sherry. So in my class, I don't get upset if people call me Sherry, but if you call me Dr. Sherry, I'm going to be, what's the word? Much more impressed. And in the future, if you ask me something, I'm going to more likely give you the favor than if you don't. For example, if you want a reference letter, I would be more inclined to write a nice reference letter than if you just called me Sherry, because I like that modicum of respect.
Okay, so let's say I already have a recommendation later. Okay, so for your perspective, like both of us, what is the biggest challenge in intercultural communication? Because I know you both have like background experience in intercultural communication, and you've lived in different countries.
I think it's when you don't know that something has been misunderstood. What you don't know, what you don't know. You thought that you had an agreement to do this, and the other person thought they had an agreement, but you had two totally different ideas about it, and you didn't know that you had not agreed. But I think one of the worst problems I ever had was with another American who had lived in Norway for a long time because she had married there. And she and I would talk, and we would, agree, okay, this point, this point, this point, this point. But then she would just change her mind, and she wouldn't consult with me, and she would just change everything and say, here. And then when I would be unhappy about this, she's like, well, you should be glad I changed this. Look at all this work I did. So that was a very odd situation, that it was someone from the US. And that is probably one of the greatest problems I had.
Yeah, I think sometimes there can be miscommunication, and the way people communicate from one culture to the next is different, very simply. And I can think of plenty of examples. Explicit and implicit communication. I think that one thing that we share here in France with the American culture is that we do have a tendency to be very explicit in what we say. On appelle un chat. We call it like it is, so to speak, in many ways, without beating around the bush. It makes me think of many Asian cultures, especially in Japan, where there's a lot of implicit communication that takes place, whether it be body language, hand gestures, facial expressions that we can't get only by words, or even if we do have communication by words. For example, in Japan, nobody says no, or in a different way. So if somebody says yes, 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 I'm going to be there next week on Wednesday at 3:00. Yes, I'll think about it. As a Westerner, we might have the impression that, yeah, we're going to meet next week on Wednesday at 3:00. But that's not necessarily the case, because there's a bunch of context about, confirming the date and making sure that everybody is on the same page. And yes does not necessarily mean yes. Yes can sometimes mean no. And so this, of course, can lead to some pretty interesting situations. But there are plenty of examples of miscommunication. Language as well. I mean, if we translate simply from one language to the next, when speaking a foreign language, it doesn't work. If somebody came with a magic wand and tapped on our head and said, okay, you're going to now speak Russian or Chinese or whatever language, Swahili, and you say exactly word for word what you would say in English or in French or Spanish in another language, it wouldn't translate the same way. I mean, there are idiomatic expressions, there are a way of saying things. So I would say one of the biggest challenges in intercultural communication would be misunderstandings and understanding, especially the context. Contextual meaning is very important.
Yeah, because the context sometimes holds a lot of the message. So, thank you for these examples and experiences, because sometimes all these experiences change us in unexpected ways. And now we would like to explore how this connotation transform people, both like personally and also professionally. So, how has this experience transformed your personality? And if you have to sum up in only one word the experience of this collaboration, what would it be?
I would say love, because I get such joy out of meeting and talking to people. I really like the students in France. I really like the students in Russia. I really enjoyed getting to meet people, and yeah, they're like my students. I'd love to have them in my class. And I think that goes back to what I said about relationships too. Like, yeah, and I like that. And I know, Monsieur Buckwalter, you put such effort into learning the names of my students, and they really appreciate that. They feel like you like them.
Yeah, I think that love is good. One word to wrap it all up, huh? Um, yeah, I would, along those lines, friendship. Bridging the gap between cultures through virtual exchanges is something that both Sherry and I strive to do in what we do. And we're not doing it because somebody has told us, put this into place, or, there's no ulterior motive behind what we do apart from trying to bring people together. And really, for me, that's the spirit of the university. In the word university, there's uni, which means one, and unity. We're all coming together in the same space, even if this space is virtual.
Okay, thank you so much. And I really appreciate that you both are my teachers, because you're so, like, your passion and the way you like what you do is transmitted to us. And I really wanted to thank you. And now I would like to you to give an advice or a final thought for listeners, maybe teachers, maybe students who are crossing through a culture shock or any kind of experience related with culture.
Well, Luisa, I mean, that's really sweet of you to say. We're really happy to have you as a student as well. It's always so rich having people that are dynamic and can bring a new perspective to our classroom. So thank you for your questions and your interest. A piece of advice that we might give to someone engaging in intercultural communication, I would say, have an open mind. Have an open mind and understand that things are not as they seem. You might have your own perspective on things that but it's hard to go into somebody's mind and say, "Oh, well, they see things in this way." For example, that's kind of a stupid example, but if I write the number 6 here on the table, from my perspective it's a 6, but from your perspective it's a 9.
Of course.
Because you're sitting in a different place, you have different experiences, so you're going to see even the same situation in a different way. And I think, on the contrary, that's not an obstacle. It's richness. The more we can understand each other and our differences, the richer we become ourselves.
Thank you so much for your advice. What about you, Dr. Robinson?
I'm going to tell a little story leading up to a model that my friend Laura and I have developed. A pearl is a really beautiful thing. We make jewelry out of it and we love it. Pearls are great, but pearls were created from a problem. A little piece of sand gets into an oyster and it really irritates it. It's a tough thing to deal with, but it covers it with the nacre again and again and again as it works through the problem. And eventually it's created this beautiful pearl. So we created a model for what you can learn or how you can benefit from doing something like a virtual exchange. And that's P for persistence, E for empathy, A for adaptability, R for relationships, L for lifelong learning, and S for self-awareness. Because as you keep working with your partners from another country, you learn that yes, you can stick with it. You really can do this. And as you learn about the other people, you learn about their perspective and say, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way. Adapt, we definitely have to do. We have to adapt to schedules, adapt to different times, adapt to different ways of doing things. But from doing all that, we create relationships. Like, I have a friend in France. I have a friend in Pennsylvania. And we learn that we are going to learn for the rest of our lives. This is not just the only time we'll be learning something. And then the S for self-awareness, that's what puts it all together, that you learn that about yourself. And it's like, yeah, I can do this. Next time I come up against a problem, I know that I can tackle this problem. It may not be easy, but I can do it. So that's our pearls model. And that would be my gift to the world, the pearls model.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for both of you for taking the time to share your experiences and insights.
Well, thank you, Luisa.
Yes, it was inspiring to hear how collaborations across border can transform on not only education but also people's lives. And if this episode inspired you, don't forget to follow the M2C podcast, share your thoughts on social media, and stay tuned for our next episode. See you soon for another inspiring conversation. And thank you again for both of you to take the time to do this.
Thank you, Luisa.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.